When you finally leave a narcissist, that's the title of this video. Leaving a narcissist is really simple. It's not easy to leave a narcissist. Leaving a narcissist comes after many months or years of psychological manipulation, emotional exhaustion, and deeply ingrained self-doubt. Now, the moment you finally walk away might not be dramatic. It might be quiet, almost anticlimactic, but inside it's a revolution. Now, remember one thing about narcissists. They're selfish, self-centered, egocentric, egotistic, self-absorbed individuals. These are people who lack empathy. They are arrogant and they need constant attention, constant validation, constant praise, constant recognition, acknowledgement from you. Now, when you finally leave a narcissist, the narcissist thinks you'll leave. When you leave a narcissist, the narcissist never thinks you'll leave. They count on your loyalty, your empathy, and your desire to fix things. So when you finally do walk away, the narcissist is shocked, not necessarily because they care, but because you've shattered their illusion of control. They can't believe it that you left. Now, when you leave a narcissist, you question yourself at first. You'll ask yourself, was it really that bad? Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you're overreacting. Now, this confusion is part of the psychological aftermath of gaslighting, which erodes your ability to trust your own perceptions. When you leave a narcissist, there's grief, even for the illusion. You didn't just lose a person, you lost the hope that they would change, that love could fix them, that things could go back to how they were in the beginning, before the mask slipped. Now, when you finally leave a narcissist, the silence is deafening. After living in a constant state of emotional chaos, silence feels unnatural. You're used to walking on eggshells, bracing for the next outburst or manipulation. Now there's just peace, but peace can feel foreign at first. When you leave a narcissist finally, comes guilt. You replay every interaction, wondering if you are cruel or too impatient. You remember the good times, the apologies, the promises. Your empathy becomes a weapon used against you, even in their absence. Now, when you finally leave a narcissist, but eventually clarity will begin to resurface. Clarity will begin to surface. Now you remember how often you felt small. You'll remember how often your needs were dismissed, how your boundaries were ignored or ridiculed. It starts to make sense. You weren't crazy. You were surviving. When you finally leave a narcissist, you learn about narcissistic abuse. The patterns, the terms, love bombing, devaluation, and discard. Now you'll learn about them. Suddenly your story is not isolated. There's a name for what you went through, and that is narcissism. There's a community, and that is community of narcissistic abuse survivors. Now there is validation. Now, when you leave a narcissist, your self-esteem is in pieces. Narcissists slowly chip away at your confidence. Through subtle digs, blame shifting, or outright contempt. Now, rebuilding yourself isn't about ego. It's about remembering that you are worthy of respect, love, and kindness. When you leave a narcissist, you miss who you were before them. Maybe you are more joyful, more spontaneous, more trusting. Now, the person who existed before the trauma feels distant, but they are not gone. They are waiting to be remembered, reawakened. When you leave a narcissist, you start setting boundaries, and it feels terrifying. Saying no used to come with consequences. Now, even in safe relationships, you flinch. But with practice, the fear begins to fade. Boundaries become your protection, not your punishment. When you leave a narcissist, sometimes the narcissist tries to come back. They might love bomb you again. They might send long messages. They might promise change or guilt trip you. It is not love, it is control. And with clarity, you begin to recognize the manipulation for what it is. When you finally leave a narcissist, you feel angry, really angry. Maybe for the first time, not just at them, but at yourself too. Why did I stay? Why didn't I see it sooner? You ask yourself. Now this anger is healthy. It is a sign that your spirit is waking up and reclaiming its worth. When you leave a narcissist, some people don't understand. They might say, it couldn't have been that bad, or they seemed so nice. Now, narcissists are skilled at performing. You learn to stop explaining yourself to people who haven't lived it. When you leave a narcissist, you realize that healing isn't linear. Some days you feel powerful, grounded, and shakable. Other days you spiral. Now, this is normal. Emotional recovery is messy, but it's also real, raw, and incredibly brave. When you leave a narcissist, you learn to trust yourself again. Slowly, intuitively, you begin to listen to your gut. The voice inside you that was silenced now speaks with more strength. You follow it, it leads you to peace. When you leave a narcissist, finally, you stop romanticizing the beginning. The love bombing wasn't real love, it was a hook. Narcissists mirror your desires to draw you in. Once you see the manipulation clearly, the fantasy begins to dissolve. When you leave a narcissist, you start to see patterns in past relationships. Maybe this wasn't the first narcissist in your life. Maybe you learn to normalize dysfunction early. Now, recognizing these patterns empowers you to break them. Now, when you finally leave a narcissist, you rebuild your identity piece by piece. Who are you without their voice in your head? What do you love? What do you want? This process of rediscovery can feel overwhelming, but also exciting. It's a return to yourself. When you leave a narcissist, you find new relationships, and they feel unfamiliar. Healthy love is calm, respectful, mutual. At first, that might seem boring compared to the highs and lows you are used to. But in time, you realize this is what safety feels like. Now, when you leave a narcissist, you stop over-explaining. You don't need to justify your boundaries, your absence, your silence. Narcissists trained you to explain everything because they never respected your no. Now you realize that no is enough. When you finally leave a narcissist, you discover how strong you really are. Not the performative kind of strength, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind that got you through the gaslighting, the trauma, and the decision to finally walk away. That strength is yours now. When you finally leave a narcissist, you reclaim your joy, whether it's laughter with friends, music, nature, or just a quiet morning. You feel joy again, not the manic highs of trauma bonding, but the grounded joy of being free. When you finally leave a narcissist, you stop trying to save people who don't want to change. You recognize that empathy without boundaries leads to self-destruction. Now you choose relationships where love flows both ways. When you finally leave a narcissist, you forgive yourself for staying, for trying, for losing yourself. You realize that your loyalty wasn't a weakness. It was a beautiful part of you. You just gave it to the wrong person. You become more discerning. You spot red flags faster. You don't ignore your gut. You don't fall for surface charm. You've been through the fire and now you see clearly. You share your story, maybe. Not because you owe it to anyone, but because others need to hear it. Whether it's a friend, a stranger online, or just your journal. Your voice has power now. You stop expecting closure from them. Narcissists rarely give honest closure. You learn to create your own by choosing truth over illusion, growth over fantasy, and freedom over fear. When you finally leave a narcissist, you become your own protector. Where once you needed them to validate your worth, now you know you are enough, you are whole, you are your own home. You realize living wasn't the end, it was the beginning of healing, reclaiming, becoming. You didn't just escape something toxic, you walked towards something sacred. That is yourself. Now, after leaving a narcissist, you need to do some things. Number one, you need to go no contact or low contact if kids are involved. Cutting off all communication is the most effective way to heal. If no contact isn't possible, then try shared custody. Use grey rock methods. Stay emotionally neutral, brief, and boring. Now, to get more tips, please make sure you watch the next video. Thank you.